This approach is reckless. We need to reconsider.
Your input is noted. We're proceeding.
That's unacceptable. We need to discuss the project risks.
The projections are fine. Don't worry.
I'm not worried. I'm prepared.
The conference room buzzed with fluorescent hums, the air thick with stale coffee and quiet tension. Tasha Reynolds adjusted the strap of her laptop bag and tried to ignore the sharp, condescending gaze of Derek Lang, her manager. His smirk didn't reach his eyes, which flicked over her like she was an uninvited intruder. "Really, Tasha," Derek said, voice low but venomous. "You think you can handle this client pitch? Don't overpromise, okay? We wouldn't want misunderstandings." The words landed like a stone in her chest. The team chuckled, some nervously, some complicit, while Tasha clenched her fists under the table. She could feel the sweat prickling along her hairline. Light from the projector cut across the polished table, casting harsh shadows on Derek's face. Each slide he clicked felt like a countdown. Tasha's heart thumped, echoing in her ears louder than his laughter. The client leaned forward, eyebrows raised, unaware of the invisible barrier separating her from respect. Then, as if rehearsed, Derek jabbed at the presentation. "Maybe someone else should lead, someone, who's presentable?" Hush fell. Tasha's mouth went dry. She felt the sting of every stereotype, every subtle dismissal she had endured silently. Her fingers hovered over the laptop keys, trembling. She wanted to vanish, to sink into the chair and disappear. Instead, she whispered, voice sharp but controlled, "I'm presenting, Derek. I always have." The room froze. Derek's smirk faltered. Tasha's pulse raced, mind flickering with possibilities. HR, documentation, witnesses. A single moment hung in the air, taut, unresolved, charged with the weight of retaliation, exposure, and the unknown. The morning sunlight slanted through the blinds, slicing the conference room into sharp lines of light and shadow. Tasha Reynolds adjusted her blazer and perched her laptop on the polished oak table, trying to steady the tremor in her hands. She could feel the familiar weight of Derek Lang's eyes on her, scanning, judging, dismissing before she even spoke. Derek's smirk widened as the team trickled in. "Morning, everyone," he said, voice smooth as ice. "Ready for the big pitch." The words sounded innocent, but his glance at Tasha lingered, lingering long enough to signal, clearly, who belonged here and who didn't. Tasha swallowed hard, resisting the urge to flinch. The client, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a crisp suit, smiled politely. "Excited to hear your presentation." Derek stepped in front of the projector. "Tasha, maybe you want to." He paused, smirk twitching. "Start us off. Or would that be ambitious?" A few suppressed laughs from the team echoed around the room. Tasha's chest tightened. She could hear her own heartbeat, loud and insistent. She lifted her chin, voice steady, almost too calm. "I'll start. I've prepared thoroughly." The slides clicked forward. Derek hovered behind her, commenting under his breath, loud enough for nearby colleagues to hear. Not exactly what the client wants, but you gave it your best, right?" Tasha's jaw clenched. The words were venom disguised as casual critique. She met the client's gaze. The woman nodded encouragingly, oblivious to the tension. The room's fluorescent lights reflected off the sleek surface of the table, blinding and harsh. Then the knife. Derek leaned over the laptop, pointing to a chart. Perhaps someone else more presentable should lead this section. The laughter was sharper this time, crueler, and Tasha felt the sting of every stereotype, every subtle dismissal she had endured silently. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling. A flash of anger, humiliation, and fear collided in her chest. Her voice dropped, cutting through the room's uneasy silence. "I'm presenting, Derek. I always have." Derek's smirk faltered. He blinked, as if unaccustomed to confrontation. Colleagues shifted in their seats, some avoiding eye contact, others watching the subtle power play unfold. Tasha's mind raced. HR protocols, email logs, witness statements. She pictured herself documenting this moment, saving evidence, preparing for the inevitable retaliation. Every instinct screamed that she had to act, and yet, she felt the weight of silence pressing in, heavy and suffocating. The client leaned forward, eyebrows raised. Derek cleared his throat. The tension was taut, like a wire stretched to the breaking point. One wrong move could shatter it all. Tasha clicked to the next slide. Her voice grew stronger, steadier, each word a small rebellion against the injustice imposed on her. Derek leaned back, arms crossed, visibly frustrated. The room hummed with unspoken questions. Who had the authority here? Who was respected? As she concluded the first section, the client nodded, impressed. Derek muttered under his breath, "Lucky client." Tasha's pulse slowed slightly, but the fight wasn't over. The first blow had been struck, and the rest of the battle loomed ahead. She exhaled, forcing her fingers to stop trembling. In this room, every glance, every whispered comment carried stakes. And Tasha had just made it clear she wouldn't be invisible. Outside the conference room, the hallway stretched long and quiet, a temporary reprieve before the storm. Her phone buzzed in her bag. An unknown number. She hesitated before checking it. A message from HR. "Can we meet today? It's urgent." Her stomach dropped. Derek's smirk, the team's laughter, the client's polite nod. All of it felt like a distant echo now. The next move was out of her hands. A chill ran down her spine. Something was coming, and she had no idea if she was ready. The fluorescent lights in the HR office buzzed faintly, a constant, uncomfortable hum that made Tasha's skin prickle. She adjusted her blazer and smoothed her skirt, hands trembling slightly, despite telling herself she had prepared for this moment. The hallway outside was quiet, sterile, the beige walls echoing every footstep. "Ms. Reynolds, please have a seat," said Marcy Hall, the HR manager, a woman with tight curls and a clipboard bristling with papers. Her tone was polite, but the hesitation in her eyes told Tasha that she had heard complaints like this before, and many didn't go anywhere. Tasha sat, placing her laptop bag carefully beside her chair. She felt the weight of the room, the authority of the HR desk looming like a gatekeeper. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice," she began, voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. Marcy nodded, flipping through a stack of files. "Of course. I understand you've had some concerns regarding your manager, Derek Lang. Can you tell me what happened?" Tasha exhaled slowly, recalling the conference room, Derek's smirk, the laughter, the words that stung like poison. "During this morning's client pitch, Derek publicly questioned my ability to lead," she said. "He made comments about who is presentable and who should present in front of the client and the team." Marcy scribbled something, glancing at Tasha. "I see. Were there witnesses?" "Yes. Several colleagues were in the room, and I have emails documenting prior incidents," Tasha replied, reaching into her bag and pulling out her laptop. "I've kept a record of microaggressions, comments, and undermining behavior over the past 6 months. Marcy's eyes flicked over the screen as Tasha opened a neatly organized folder. Time-stamped emails, meeting notes, screenshots. "Impressive," she said softly, almost admiringly. Then her tone shifted. "But you understand these matters can be complicated. Derek is a senior manager, and complaints of this nature require substantial evidence." Tasha's stomach knotted. She had anticipated bureaucracy, but hearing it out loud made the path feel longer. "I understand," she said, trying to keep frustration from bleeding into her voice. "But this isn't just about a single incident. It's systemic. The microaggressions, the constant undermining, it's pattern behavior." Marcy leaned back, folding her arms. "Pattern behavior. Yes, that's helpful. Do you have any direct accounts from colleagues?" Tasha hesitated. She knew some would be hesitant to speak up. "I've reached out to a few allies. They're willing to provide statements if needed. I can get those to you by the end of the day." Marcy nodded. "Good. That will strengthen your case. HR's role is to ensure fairness, but we have to follow protocol. That means interviews, documentation, and, if necessary, formal disciplinary actions." She paused, her gaze softening slightly. I want to be clear, Ms. Reynolds. This will take time. And it may not be immediate justice. But we take this seriously. Tasha swallowed, fighting the urge to roll her eyes. She had expected a lecture about patience, but she forced herself to nod. Understood, she said quietly. Marcy shifted, tapping her pen against the desk. I do have one piece of advice. Keep your records thorough. Continue documenting incidents. And avoid direct confrontation with Derek outside of mediated settings. Escalation can work against you. Tasha's jaw clenched. Avoid confrontation. She wanted to storm back into the office, demand an apology, prove her worth. Instead, she nodded again. I'll follow protocol, she said. There was a moment of silence, heavy and charged. The faint hum of the fluorescent lights filled the gaps where words might have been. Finally, Marcy added, We'll schedule interviews today. And Ms. Reynolds, she hesitated, then spoke softly, almost as a warning. Document everything meticulously. You're stepping into delicate territory. Tasha exhaled slowly, nodding. She felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. A small victory, tempered by the knowledge that the battle had only just begun. As she stood to leave, Marcy added, Oh, and one more thing. Derek has a reputation for charm. Some may side with him instinctively. Be prepared for that. The words landed like a cold splash of water. Tasha paused at the door, hand on the knob, heart hammering. She knew the road ahead would be uphill, littered with subtle resistance, skepticism, and quiet betrayals. Yet, for the first time, she felt a flicker of control, the power of documentation, witnesses, and truth. She stepped into the hallway, the fluorescent hum now a rhythm to her resolve. Somewhere beyond the beige walls, injustice had taken form, but she would not be silenced. She pulled out her phone and typed a quick note to her mentor. Meeting done. Char listening. Step 1 complete. A faint smile touched her lips as she walked toward the elevator. The storm wasn't over. It hadn't even begun in earnest. But for the first time, Tasha Reynolds felt that the tide might just be shifting. Tasha stepped into the open-plan office, the hum of computers and low chatter wrapping around her like a familiar, suffocating blanket. The sunlight from the floor-to-ceiling windows cut across the carpet, illuminating dust motes that danced lazily in the air. She felt the weight of unseen eyes, colleagues subtly shifting in their chairs, some pretending to work, others pretending not to notice. A whisper brushed past her desk. Did you see what happened in the meeting this morning? Tasha stiffened, glancing at Jamal Rivers, a fellow analyst sitting across from her. He gave a tight nod, eyes wary. Yeah, that was rough. He really humiliated you in front of the client. She forced a calm smile. Thanks. I managed. Jamal leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. You're documenting everything, right? Don't let him get away with it. Tasha nodded. Her fingers itched to type up notes immediately, to catalog every sneer, every jab. But she also knew the delicate nature of office politics. Some allies would whisper their support. Others would stay silent, fearful. Her colleague Erica Chen approached, coffee in hand. Morning, Tasha. Heard about the pitch. You handled it well. Her tone was careful, measured, almost rehearsed. Tasha smiled faintly. Thanks, Erica. Means a lot. But the whispers persisted like a low tide, shaping the undercurrents of office dynamics. From one desk to another, small comments, clipped sentences, and half-hearted praises carried weight. Tasha could sense the tension, the invisible walls, the subtle recalibrations of who would speak and who would stay quiet. At lunch, she found herself in the break room with Marcus Lee, another colleague and friend. The microwave beeped, cutting through the murmurs of conversation. You okay? Marcus asked, stirring his soup. His brow was furrowed, worry etched across his features. I will be, Tasha said softly. It's just tiring, you know? Every day feels like I'm walking through a minefield. Marcus nodded carefully. I know. Some people just don't see it. Or they see it and don't want to admit it. Tasha sighed, the weight of cumulative microaggressions pressing on her chest. I keep thinking, maybe I should confront it openly. But then there's HR and there's Derek, and the team. Some will stand with me, some won't. Marcus placed a hand on hers briefly. You're not alone. And you're smart to document everything. That's how we fight this. With evidence. Later, back at her desk, Tasha began typing emails, screenshots, and meeting notes into a secure folder. Each entry was precise. Date, time, comment, witness, tone. She felt a quiet satisfaction in the act, a small assertion of control in a space that often made her feel powerless. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mentor, Vanessa Parker. Stay calm. Office whispers can be poisonous, but your preparation is the antidote. Tasha smiled briefly, typing back, thanks. I needed that. By mid-afternoon, the whispers took a more direct form. Derek's laughter echoed through the open floor, clipped and sharp. He passed by her desk, eyes glinting with subtle derision. Busy? He asked, tone loaded with insinuation. Tasha looked up, meeting his gaze. Yes. Focused on my work. He smirked, but didn't press further. Instead, he moved on, leaving a trail of tension behind him. The team around them exhaled softly, as if relief was permitted once the predator moved along. A meeting invite popped onto Tasha's screen. HR. Follow-up discussion. 3 p.m. Her chest tightened. She saved her work and leaned back in her chair, eyes closing briefly. Whispers, glances, half-smiles. They all carried implications, subtle warnings, and tests of loyalty. She knew that in this environment, silence could feel like betrayal, and speaking up could feel like risk. Yet, Tasha also felt the faint pulse of empowerment. Each whispered observation, each cautious ally, each documented insult was a thread in a web she was slowly weaving, one that could hold Derek accountable. She glanced around the office, noting faces. Some sympathetic, some indifferent, some complicit. The system of subtle biases, coded comments, and silent approvals was alive here, pervasive and insidious. But Tasha also realized that awareness, documentation, and strategic action could bend that system. As she packed up her things to leave for the HR meeting, a faint tremor of anticipation ran through her. The whispers would follow her, but now she was armed, with facts, witnesses, and a plan. Derek might think he controlled the narrative, but Tasha was beginning to see the contours of a counterforce forming. She stepped into the hallway, phone in hand, heart steadying. Each whisper, each coded glance had a purpose now. She had a purpose too. And for the first time in months, she felt like she might actually turn the tide. The hum of the office felt heavier that morning, almost oppressive, as if the walls themselves were waiting for the inevitable. Tasha arrived early, coffee in hand, trying to steel herself for whatever Derek might throw at her today. She could feel the tension vibrating beneath her skin, every glance from her coworkers charged with unspoken warnings. She hadn't even logged into her computer when Derek appeared at her desk, leaning casually against the partition. "Tasha," he said, voice smooth but with an edge that made her stomach clench. "Heard you've been making quite a fuss with HR. Documenting everything, are we?" Tasha met his gaze, refusing to look away. "Yes, because I want accountability, not excuses." His smirk widened, sharp and calculating. Accountability. Or vindication. Interesting distinction. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Then he leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You think you're clever, don't you? But clever doesn't always win in this office." Tasha swallowed the surge of anger that threatened to spill. "Maybe not. But integrity does." Derek laughed softly, almost to himself, and straightened. "Integrity? Cute. Let's see how long that lasts." He moved on, leaving a trail of tension in his wake. By mid-morning, the office whispers had escalated. Derek had found another opportunity to humiliate someone else, a junior black analyst named Malik Turner, who had accidentally misread a data chart in a client report. You see, Tasha, Derek said in a meeting with both present and remote staff, we need attention to detail. Some of us just need a little more help to keep up. Don't you agree, Malik? The laughter that followed was sharp, biting. Malik's shoulders slumped, his hands gripping the edge of the table. Tasha felt the familiar sting of helplessness and rage. Every coded insult, every casual public humiliation, was a brick in the wall Derek had built between respect and reality. When the meeting adjourned, Tasha cornered Malik in the hallway. You're not alone, she said quietly. Document it. Don't let him get away with this. Malik nodded, eyes wide and grateful. I will. Thank you, Tasha. Later, Tasha returned to her desk and opened her folder, cataloging the incidents. Timestamps, witness names, exact words. The pattern was clear. Derek was escalating, testing boundaries, and thriving on the silence and fear of others. Her phone buzzed with a message from Vanessa. Stay calm, Tasha. This is the moment you've been preparing for. Don't react emotionally, but don't stay silent either. The afternoon brought a conference call with clients, Derek front and center. He leaned back in his chair, smirk present, exuding an air of arrogance that made the room tense. Let's review the numbers again, shall we? Perhaps someone who actually understands the details could explain. Tasha's fingers itched to reply. She took a deep breath and raised her hand. I've analyzed the numbers. I'll present the breakdown now. A silence fell. Derek's smirk faltered, replaced with a thin veil of irritation. Ah yes, by all means, he said, voice clipped. Tasha's presentation began, her voice steady, each word precise. She could feel Derek's gaze piercing her back, a physical weight that threatened to buckle her composure. And yet, she continued, allowing facts, logic, and clarity to speak louder than insults. When she concluded, there was a pause, an almost imperceptible shift in the room's energy. The client, attentive and impressed, leaned forward. Thank you, Tasha. That was very thorough. Derek coughed, forcing a laugh. Well, good job, I suppose. His words were hollow. The real breaking point came when Derek cornered her later, near the printer. You think you've won today? He asked, voice low, eyes flashing with anger. You think HR is on your side? Don't get cocky. Tasha's pulse raced. The air felt thick, charged. I'm not cocky, she said. I'm prepared. And I won't let you intimidate me. He leaned in, close enough that she could feel the heat from his body. Watch yourself, Tasha. Some things don't end well for people like you. Her stomach churned. Fear, anger, and defiance collided. She opened her mouth, ready to respond, when her phone buzzed. A message from HR. Investigation underway. Interviews scheduled. They come. Derek's eyes flicked to her phone. He straightened, smirk returning, but this time it carried unease beneath the arrogance. We'll see, he muttered and walked away. Tasha exhaled slowly, chest tight, heart hammering. The confrontation had escalated, the stakes higher than ever. But for the first time, the fear mingled with a sense of purpose. She had witnesses, documentation, and HR involvement. Derek had tested boundaries, pushed too far, and now the system she had been building was beginning to respond. Sitting back at her desk, Tasha began typing an incident report, fingers flying across the keys. Every detail mattered, every word a small act of resistance. The office whispers were louder now, yes, but they carried a different weight. They were no longer just warnings. They were pieces of the story she was assembling, a record of injustice that would not go ignored. The breaking point had come, and Tasha Reynolds would not let it define her. The evening sun slanted through Tasha's apartment window, casting warm stripes across her dining table. Her laptop hummed softly, open to a neatly organized folder labeled HR documentation. Derek Lang. Coffee cup at her side, she began compiling every email, Slack message, and client feedback that demonstrated the subtle and not-so-subtle patterns of discrimination she had endured. Okay, she murmured to herself, fingers poised above the keyboard. Everything needs to be precise. Dates, times, witnesses, facts. Her phone buzzed. Vanessa's name flashed on the screen. Need to talk strategy. Tasha smiled faintly and typed back. Yes. Now's perfect. Moments later, Vanessa's call connected. Tasha, how are you holding up? Vanessa's voice was calm, grounding, a contrast to the whirlwind of office politics. I'm okay, Tasha admitted, her gaze flicking to the spreadsheet of incidents. But Derek isn't going to make this easy. I need everything in order before HR moves forward. Good. That's exactly what I wanted to hear, Vanessa said. Documentation, witness statements, and pattern tracking. That's your strongest weapon. And don't forget, subtle acts are still acts. Microaggressions, undermining comments, they all count. The system will see them if you're thorough. Tasha nodded, though Vanessa couldn't see her. I've started reaching out to allies, but some are hesitant. I don't want anyone risking their position. Vanessa's sigh was quiet but empathetic. That's why preparation matters. Collect what you can. Protect your sources. But make it clear. Silence now doesn't protect them, it protects him. Hanging up, Tasha dove back into her work. She drafted an email to Malik Turner, asking him to detail the incident from the earlier meeting. Carefully, she worded her request. Please include what was said, who was present, and your impressions. Char may follow up. Her inbox pinged with responses from 2 other colleagues willing to share statements. Carefully worded, professional, and factual. Tasha copied them into a secure document, cross-referencing times and details. Each account built a mosaic of Derek's escalating behavior. By late evening, the pattern was undeniable. Derek's microaggressions weren't isolated. They formed a chain of intimidation, subtle public humiliation, and undermining behavior aimed at her and other black colleagues. The next morning, Tasha arrived at the office with a quiet determination. The fluorescent lights didn't feel oppressive now. They felt like a stage, each desk a position in the larger narrative she was constructing. She moved past murmurs of gossip, aware that whispers would always trail her when challenging power. Derek, of course, sensed the shift. Busy again, Tasha? He asked, leaning casually against the printer. Plotting your next move with HR? She looked at him, unflinching. Preparing my case, yes. Because actions have consequences. His smirk faltered for just a fraction of a second. Be careful. Not everyone wants to see you succeed. I'm not asking for permission, she replied, voice calm, controlled. By mid-morning, Tasha had scheduled one-on-one meetings with colleagues willing to provide statements. She kept each conversation professional but thorough, asking for exact words, tones, witnesses present, and any prior similar incidents. The more she collected, the clearer the story became. Derek's behavior was neither accidental nor isolated. She returned to her desk and opened the HR portal. Uploading documents, emails, and transcripts, she created a detailed timeline spanning several months. Each entry emphasized not only the verbal microaggressions but also the unspoken power dynamics. The cold glances, the exclusion from important meetings, the subtle shifts in responsibility. At lunch, she met with Vanessa again, this time in a quiet cafe nearby. You've got a strong case, Vanessa said, reviewing the notes Tasha handed her. Pattern, witnesses, documentation, all present. HR won't be able to ignore this. Tasha sipped her coffee, tension in her shoulders easing slightly. It feels empowering, finally, but also scary. If Derek finds out, things could escalate. Vanessa leaned forward. He'll sense your strength. That's inevitable. But your preparation shields you. And the truth is on your side. One slip from him now could expose everything. Back at the office, the whispers grew louder. Derek circulated memos, subtly undermining colleagues, testing boundaries, flexing control. But Tasha noticed the hesitation creeping into his step. The more she documented, the less absolute his power felt. By evening, Tasha sat alone at her desk, reviewing the day's collection of statements and emails. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear but anticipation. The case was almost complete. Each word, each detail, each witness account was a brick in the foundation she was building. And as she saved the final document, ready to submit to HR, she felt a quiet satisfaction. Derek had assumed control for too long. The pattern of abuse was clear. The system, slowly and deliberately, was beginning to respond. The storm wasn't over. But Tasha Reynolds was no longer the target. She was the force directing its course. The HR conference room smelled of sanitizer and old carpet, a sterile battlefield for what was about to unfold. Tasha sat upright, laptop open, fingers tapping lightly on the table. Across from her, Derek Lang lounged in his chair, arms crossed, exuding that same smug arrogance she had been fighting for months. Marcy Hall, HR manager, sat between them, clipboard poised like a referee ready to enforce rules she didn't always control. "Thank you both for coming," Marcy began, voice even but firm. "We're here to address recent concerns regarding workplace conduct. Tasha, please present your case." Tasha took a deep breath, scanning her organized folder. Each email, transcript, and witness statement lay ready, evidence of systematic undermining and public humiliation. She opened with calm precision. "Over the past 6 months," she began, voice steady, "I have experienced repeated instances of discriminatory behavior from Derek Lang. These include microaggressions, public mockery, exclusion from critical meetings, and direct comments about my competence and appearance." Derek smirked, leaning back. "Microaggressions? Mockery? Really? I'm simply providing constructive feedback." Tasha met his gaze without flinching. "Feedback doesn't come in the form of, 'Perhaps someone more presentable should lead this meeting,' or laughing at mistakes of colleagues from underrepresented backgrounds." Marcy shifted slightly, taking notes. "Can you provide specifics?" Tasha clicked through the slides, displaying emails, meeting logs, and witness statements. Each timestamp, each comment, each pattern told a story of escalating abuse. "During the client pitch on February 18th, she continued, Derek publicly questioned my ability to lead, made suggestive comments about appearance, and laughed in front of the team. Multiple colleagues witnessed this, and statements corroborate the pattern of behavior." Derek's smirk faltered. He leaned forward, voice clipped. "I was concerned about the client's impression. My comments were professional and in the company's interest." "You're exaggerating." Tasha held her ground. "Professional interest doesn't involve mocking employees or undermining their authority publicly. And multiple accounts, emails, and prior incidents establish this as a pattern, not an isolated moment." Marcy interjected, calm but firm. "Derek, these documented incidents show a clear escalation. HR takes repeated behavior very seriously. Do you wish to respond to any specific examples?" Derek's eyes flicked over the documents. I may have been firm, but I was mentoring. Isn't that part of leadership?" Tasha's jaw tightened. "Mentorship does not involve humiliation or discrimination. Guidance and intimidation are not the same thing." A tense silence filled the room. Derek opened his mouth, closed it again, and exhaled sharply. The air was thick with unspoken threats and suppressed fear. The pattern of his arrogance was unraveling, each documented incident pulling at the threads of his authority. Marcy glanced at Derek. "We will be conducting formal interviews with witnesses, reviewing documentation, and assessing all evidence before HR determines the appropriate course of action. However, the volume and consistency of accounts already indicate serious misconduct." Derek leaned back, arms crossed, eyes narrowing. "This is unprecedented. I've managed teams for years. People respect me." "Respect," Tasha said softly but clearly, "cannot coexist with fear, humiliation, or bias. And what you perceive as respect is often silence. Silence isn't compliance, it's survival." For the first time, Derek's smirk faded completely. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in as the weight of truth settled over him. Tasha noticed his jaw tighten, a flicker of unease crossing his expression. Marcy nodded toward Tasha. Anything else you'd like to add? Yes, Tasha replied. She leaned forward slightly, hands on the table. This isn't just about me. It's about the environment you've created, where colleagues feel unsafe, unheard, and undervalued. HR has the chance to set a precedent here. To show that discriminatory behavior, whether subtle or overt, has consequences. Derek's hand twitched toward a folder of his own, but he didn't speak. His usual charm, his defensive quips, his casual intimidation, all were absent. He was facing the reality he had ignored for months. Marcy exhaled softly. Thank you, Tasha. We'll proceed with interviews and formal investigation. Derek, you'll be required to cooperate fully. Derek nodded stiffly, face pale beneath the office lights. Tasha felt a surge of quiet vindication. The confrontation had not been dramatic or explosive, but it had laid bare the truth. The arrogance that had shielded Derek's power was cracking under the weight of evidence, witnesses, and moral clarity. As she packed her laptop, Tasha felt a mixture of relief and lingering anxiety. The battle was far from over. Derek's career might hang by a thread, but the emotional toll, the months of fear, humiliation, and microaggressions, would not disappear overnight. She left the conference room, heart steadying, sunlight striking her back like a promise. The confrontation was complete, the first domino had fallen, and the tide had shifted. Derek's power had been challenged, and Tasha Reynolds had wielded truth, documentation, and courage as her weapon. Outside, the office hummed with oblivious activity. But Tasha knew, behind the normalcy, the machinery of justice had begun to turn. And when it did, no smirk, no charm, and no intimidation could stop it. The office had a different rhythm that morning. Whispers traveled faster, glances lingered longer, and even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed charged with anticipation. Tasha felt it the moment she stepped through the door. A subtle shift in energy, an unspoken acknowledgement that something was changing. Her inbox pinged. HR. Investigation updates attached. She opened the folder, scanning the files with growing satisfaction. Interviews had begun. Witnesses were corroborating incidents. Emails, chat messages, and meeting logs were lining up like pieces of an unstoppable pattern. Derek's arrogance had blinded him. Now it worked against him. Across the floor, Derek circulated memos, his usual charm faltering. He passed by Tasha's desk, forcing a tight smile. Morning, Tasha. Productive day. She looked up, steady and unflinching. Yes, productive, she replied. Her tone carried authority, a subtle reminder that the power dynamic was shifting. Derek's jaw tightened. He moved on, but Tasha noticed a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, the first crack in his carefully maintained armor. Later, in a team meeting, Derek attempted to assert control. I've reviewed the client feedback, he said, voice forced casual, and some adjustments are required. Let's ensure everyone is on the same page. Tasha's hand shot up. Actually, I've already compiled a full report, cross-referenced with client notes and prior project outcomes. We can review it together. Oz. The team glanced at Derek. He cleared his throat, voice clipped. Right, yes. Go ahead, Tasha. As she presented, colleagues listened intently, some taking notes, others nodding in subtle approval. Derek hovered behind her, smirking, but this time it lacked conviction. Each fact she laid out chipped away at the narrative he had tried to control for months. After the meeting, Tasha received a discreet email from HR. Preliminary review is very favorable. Derek's conduct is under formal scrutiny. Witness cooperation is strong. Her pulse quickened. The evidence was beginning to speak louder than Derek ever could. At lunch, she met Vanessa and Malik in the break room. Feels different, doesn't it? Vanessa said quietly, stirring her tea. Malik nodded. Yeah, you can see it in him. He's unsure now. People notice when authority is questioned with facts and courage. Tasha smiled faintly. I still have to be careful. He might retaliate subtly, test boundaries. But it's satisfying to know the tide is turning. Vanessa leaned in, tone serious. Tasha, you're creating precedent. Not just for yourself, but for everyone who's ever felt sidelined or humiliated. That's powerful. By mid-afternoon, whispers began to circulate more openly. Derek's emails were scrutinized, minor errors amplified, and colleagues who had stayed silent were now cautiously providing statements. The once invisible walls of fear were crumbling, replaced with documentation, witness accounts, and moral clarity. Tasha's phone buzzed, a message from HR. We're escalating this to upper management. They've seen the patterns, and they're taking it seriously. Her chest tightened with a mixture of relief and lingering tension. The battle was moving beyond her control. The system she had painstakingly navigated was beginning to respond, and Derek could no longer dictate the narrative. That afternoon, she passed Derek in the hallway. He attempted a smile, forced and brittle. Tasha, still leading. Yes, she said firmly, holding his gaze. And doing so with integrity. He swallowed, jaw tightening. We'll see how this plays out. Tasha continued walking, each step deliberate. She felt the weight of months of humiliation, fear, and silent observation beginning to shift. The power he had wielded so casually was fracturing under scrutiny, witnesses, and evidence. Back at her desk, she drafted a summary of events for HR. Concise, factual, precise. She included timestamps, witness names, and cross-references, ensuring that nothing could be misinterpreted or dismissed. The act felt almost ritualistic, each keystroke a small reclaiming of control. By evening, the office atmosphere was markedly different. Derek's usual commands and smirks had less effect. Colleagues were quieter, more assertive in subtle ways, and Tasha noticed glances of respect replacing cautious avoidance. She exhaled slowly, closing her laptop. The first signs of poetic justice were emerging. Derek's manipulation, intimidation, and unchecked authority were unraveling. But Tasha also knew the emotional cost. The months of anxiety, the tension, and the vigilance required to protect herself and others. Her phone buzzed again. A short message from Vanessa. You're changing the rules of the game. Stay strong. This is just the beginning. Tasha smiled, feeling a surge of quiet satisfaction. Derek's power was no longer absolute, and the system had begun to respond to the truth. She looked around the office, the hum of computers, the faint chatter, the sunlight falling in stripes across the floor. It all felt charged with possibility. The tide had turned. But the final reckoning was still ahead. And Tasha Reynolds, armed with courage, evidence, and resilience, was ready to see it through. The morning air in the office felt unusually tense, charged with anticipation. Derek arrived, tie slightly crooked, smirk noticeably absent. Whispers had spread. HR had escalated the investigation to upper management, and colleagues were more willing than ever to share their accounts. Tasha entered the office with calm determination. Every step felt purposeful, every glance deliberate. The power dynamics had shifted. Derek's authority was no longer unquestioned. The chain of events he had tried to control was unraveling. By mid-morning, a formal meeting was called with upper management, HR, and a few senior witnesses. Tasha presented her case one final time. Each email, transcript, and witness statement laid out clearly, facts speaking louder than anger or intimidation ever could. Derek's usual confidence faltered under scrutiny. I didn't realize, he began, but Marcy's sharp gaze cut him off. Derek, she said firmly, this is not about intent. This is about impact. The repeated incidents, corroborated by multiple witnesses, demonstrate a pattern of discriminatory behavior. HR and upper management will act accordingly. Tasha felt a surge of relief, tempered by the memory of months of anxiety and humiliation. She stayed silent, letting the evidence speak for itself. Derek attempted a few half-hearted defenses, but each was countered by witness accounts, emails, and the pattern she had meticulously documented. One of the witnesses, Malik Turner, spoke up. I've experienced firsthand the undermining behavior. It wasn't just me. Others have been affected too. It creates an environment of fear, not growth. The weight of collective testimony was undeniable. Derek's smirk had vanished entirely. His body language stiffened, defensive. Upper management exchanged looks, nodding quietly. Marcy cleared her throat. Effective immediately, Derek Lang will be removed from his managerial role pending further disciplinary action. HR will oversee reassignment and follow-up. Any retaliatory behavior will be addressed swiftly. The words landed like a gavel. The room felt smaller, tighter, as the reality of consequences settled over Derek. Colleagues glanced at each other, some stunned, some quietly relieved. Tasha exhaled slowly, allowing herself a moment of satisfaction. Justice wasn't dramatic or instantaneous, but it was real. Derek's carefully cultivated facade of power had crumbled under the weight of truth. Later, outside the conference room, a few colleagues approached Tasha cautiously. "Thank you," said Erica Chen, voice soft but sincere. "You didn't just stand up for yourself. You stood up for all of us." Jamal Rivers nodded in agreement. "Seeing the system respond, it gives me hope." Tasha smiled, feeling a mixture of relief, fatigue, and lingering trauma. "I couldn't have done it alone." Documentation, witnesses, HR support. It all mattered. The truth matters. By the end of the day, Derek had been escorted to a reassignment meeting. His aura of invincibility was gone. No smirk, no charm, no subtle intimidation. He had been exposed, and the consequences were real. His career, authority, and reputation had taken a serious hit. Tasha returned to her desk, opening her laptop one last time for the day. Emails from supportive colleagues, HR follow-ups, and messages of encouragement flowed in. Yet, beneath the satisfaction was a quiet awareness. Change had been achieved, but the emotional scars of months of intimidation and bias remained. Vanessa's message appeared. "You did it. Justice served. But remember, resilience is the ongoing work." Tasha stared at the screen, reflecting. The battle had been fought with strategy, evidence, and courage, not aggression. She had resisted humiliation and reclaimed her authority. The poetic justice was not revenge. It was accountability, exposure, and a shift in the office culture. The final domino had fallen, yet Tasha knew vigilance was still necessary. The office culture could change slowly, but she had demonstrated that silence and fear were not invincible. Integrity, preparation, and persistence had tipped the balance. By evening, Tasha walked through the office, glancing at colleagues she had once feared to meet. Some smiled, some nodded. Subtle affirmations that the system could respond, that abuses of power could be corrected. She paused briefly, letting the sunlight warm her face. The fight had been taxing, but the outcome was proof that courage and truth could dismantle even entrenched arrogance. Her reflection in the window caught her eye. Tired, determined, resilient. The office that had once felt oppressive now felt alive with possibility. The patterns of injustice had been confronted and disrupted, and though the scars remained, a new chapter was beginning, not just for her, but for everyone who had endured silently. The poetic justice wasn't dramatic vengeance. It was a system finally acknowledging wrongdoing, a manager held accountable, and a culture nudged toward fairness. And Tasha Reynolds, though forever marked by her experiences, had emerged stronger, more strategic, and unbroken. The office was quieter than usual that morning, a calm settling over the open-plan floor. Tasha entered, laptop bag slung over her shoulder, and noticed the subtle shifts in atmosphere. Colleagues moved with a little more ease, casual smiles replacing cautious glances. The tension that had once hung like a heavy fog was thinning. Jamal Rivers waved from across the room. "Morning, Tasha. How are you holding up?" Tasha returned the wave, offering a small, measured smile. "Better. Still processing everything, but relieved." He nodded, understanding. "It's strange, isn't it? The office feels different now. Not just because of Derek, but because people are noticing that injustice doesn't always get ignored." Tasha adjusted her chair, opening her laptop. She felt the weight of months of preparation, confrontation, and meticulous documentation. It's been a long fight, she admitted. But worth it. People have been hesitant for too long, afraid to speak up. Now they see it can make a difference. Erica Chen approached, coffee in hand. You've inspired a lot of us. Not just with what you did, but how you handled it. Calm, collected, and strategic. Tasha nodded. It wasn't easy. And it won't fix everything overnight. But it's a start. By mid-morning, HR called her in for a debrief. Marcy Hall smiled softly as Tasha entered. Good to see you. How are you feeling? Exhausted, Tasha admitted with a faint laugh. But also empowered. I feel like finally the system worked as it should. Marcy nodded. It did. And your preparation, documentation, and composure were key. Derek has been formally reprimanded and removed from managerial responsibilities. Upper management will monitor his reassignment closely. Tasha exhaled slowly, letting the news sink in. It feels surreal. Months of subtle attacks, microaggressions, and public humiliation. Gone. Not gone, Marcy replied gently. But accounted for. And your actions will prevent similar behavior from going unchecked in the future. Others will feel safer speaking up because of what you've done. Later that afternoon, Tasha met Vanessa for a brief walk outside the office building. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the city streets. You've changed more than just your own position, Vanessa said, voice calm but firm. You've shifted the culture. People will remember how you handled this. Tasha exhaled, letting the breeze carry away some of the tension she'd carried for months. I just hope the change sticks. That it doesn't just feel temporary, like a moment in time. Vanessa smiled. It takes time, but accountability leaves a mark. You've set a precedent. People won't forget. Back in the office, Tasha noticed colleagues approaching her with small words of encouragement. Malik Turner smiled briefly. Thanks again, Tasha, for standing up, not just for yourself but for all of us. Tasha nodded, swallowing a lump of emotion. We all have to look out for each other. That's the only way change happens. By evening, she returned to her desk, reflecting on the months that had led here. Derek's arrogance had finally met consequence. Witnesses had spoken, HR had acted, and a precedent had been set. The office felt subtly, irrevocably different. But Tasha also felt the weight of lingering scars, the anxiety she had carried, the subtle fear in interactions, the constant vigilance required to protect herself. Change had come, but the journey of healing was only beginning. She opened her laptop one last time for the day, drafting a short note for the team. Let's continue fostering respect, accountability, and collaboration. Our voices matter, and together we make the difference. As she hit send, the office lights dimmed slightly with the evening sun, casting a warm glow across her desk. For the first time in months, she allowed herself a deep breath of relief. The aftermath was quiet but significant. Derek's removal, HR's intervention, and the team's subtle cultural shift were tangible. But Tasha knew the real victory wasn't just in punishment. It was in accountability, empowerment, and the knowledge that injustice could be confronted without losing oneself to anger or retaliation. Looking out the window at the city skyline, Tasha felt a quiet determination. She had navigated months of fear, humiliation, and manipulation. She had faced a system that often favored power over justice, and she had prevailed. The aftermath was not perfect, but it was real. It was change, accountability, and the first step toward a workplace where respect and fairness could thrive. And Tasha Reynolds, resilient and resolute, had proven that even the smallest voice, armed with courage and evidence, could dismantle arrogance and systemic injustice. The morning sunlight filtered gently through the office windows, casting a warm glow across the desks. The hum of computers and soft chatter felt lighter, freer, as if the weight of months of tension had been lifted. Tasha entered, carrying a sense of calm she hadn't felt in a long time. Jamal Rivers waved from across the room. "Morning, Tasha. How's it feel, knowing things finally changed? She smiled, a quiet, steady smile. Different. Good different. But also reflective. It wasn't easy getting here. Erica Chen approached, holding 2 coffees. You did more than stand up for yourself. You set an example for all of us. Tasha accepted the coffee, nodding. I couldn't have done it alone. People had to speak up, document, and support. It's collective effort that changes things, not just one person. Later, Vanessa stopped by her desk. I wanted to check in. You've come a long way, Tasha. How are you feeling? Tasha leaned back in her chair, letting herself exhale fully for the first time in months. Empowered, still wary because trust takes time to rebuild, but stronger. I've realized that courage and preparation combined can shift even entrenched systems. Vanessa smiled, proud. And you've taught others to see that too. That's leadership. By mid-morning, Tasha was called into HR one final time for a follow-up. Marcy Hall smiled warmly. We wanted to close the loop with you. Derek Lang has been reassigned, and the disciplinary measures are final. HR will continue monitoring the team culture, but your actions have ensured lasting accountability. Tasha nodded, absorbing the weight of the words. It feels almost surreal. Months of fear, humiliation, and microaggressions. Resolved. Not erased, Marcy said gently, but addressed. And prevention mechanisms are now in place. You've not only reclaimed your own power, but helped protect others. Walking back to her desk, Tasha noticed colleagues giving subtle nods, small smiles, quiet affirmations. The office was calm, productive, and increasingly collaborative. The lingering fear that had once suffused every interaction had softened, replaced by cautious respect and professional acknowledgement. She opened her laptop and drafted a short note to the team. This experience has shown the importance of accountability, documentation, and courage. Thank you to everyone who spoke up, supported colleagues, and helped foster a respectful, inclusive environment. Let's continue building this together. Before sending, she paused, reflecting on her journey. The months of whispered fears, subtle intimidation, and coded remarks had left scars, but they had also forged resilience. She realized that change didn't require vengeance, just consistency, courage, and the willingness to act with integrity. Her phone buzzed. A message from Malik Turner. Thanks, Tasha. You've changed the office and my perspective forever. She smiled, feeling a warmth that stretched beyond the walls of the office. At lunch, she met Vanessa and Jamal for a brief walk outside. The city felt alive, the air crisp and invigorating. Seeing the office culture shift is inspiring, Jamal said. You've shown that speaking truth to power works. Tasha nodded. It does, but it also requires preparation and patience. Change isn't instant. And sometimes the emotional cost is high, even when the outcome is just. Vanessa added, You've transformed more than the office culture. You've transformed your own relationship with power, resilience, and leadership. That's lasting change. By the afternoon, Tasha returned to her desk, feeling a sense of completion. The conflict that had dominated her life for months had been confronted. The abusive manager faced consequences. HR and upper management had acknowledged and acted. The office culture was shifting. And she, though scarred by the ordeal, was stronger, wiser, and ready to continue navigating her career with integrity. Before leaving that evening, Tasha paused at the window, looking out over the city skyline. The sun was setting, casting warm orange hues across the buildings. She felt a deep sense of closure. Justice had been served, accountability had been enforced, and a precedent for fairness had been established. She exhaled, letting the tension of months dissolve with the fading light. The journey had been long, emotionally taxing, and challenging, but it had also been transformative. Tasha Reynolds had faced systemic injustice, endured humiliation, and navigated fear, but she had emerged stronger, resilient, and unbroken. As she switched off her desk lamp and gathered her things, a quiet confidence settled within her. The office, the colleagues, and the system she had engaged with would never be the same. Not because of anger or revenge, but because courage, truth, and integrity had prevailed. And as she stepped out into the evening air, Tasha felt a profound sense of accomplishment, knowing that her actions had created lasting change, not only for herself but for everyone who would walk through that office after her.